Hi, Emily. Thank you so
Hi.
much for joining me today. So first of all, tell me a little bit about yourself. What do you study? Where are you from?
I obviously study at UCL with you. I study comparative literature. I'm a second year student. I've just started my second year. Everything's online, obviously, so I'm not living in London right now, which I do miss. I'm sure you know London's amazing to live in. If expensive, it's amazing. My dad's family is Dutch, and I was born in the States, so I'm Dutch American.
Wow, I didn't know
And
that.
yeah, no, and I've lived in lots of different places in my life. I spent a lot of my childhood in the Czech Republic because my
Wow.
dad moved around a lot for work, and then he worked in Cyprus for a few years back. Yeah, so I kind
Well
of come all
traveled.
over. My mum was born in Zimbabwe to top it all off. So
Wow.
yeah,
Okay. So you've got a lot of traveling in
going
there
on.
from all over the place.
Yeah.
When did you start selling on Depop?
So I started selling on Depop, I think it was November of last year. So I think I had just started at UCL, I recall, because I was kind of balancing both at the same time. I remember I was just starting out at uni, just starting living in London.
Yeah.
There was a lot going on. So I started my account in November, but then I would say that I started using it more seriously in kind of June time. So obviously the pandemic gave everyone a lot of time to just sit at home and be bored and find things to do. And so one of the things that I decided to do was put a bit more effort and a bit more time and a bit more professionalism into my page. And it was kind of June this year when it started to go quite well for me. But yeah, I started November of last year. When I did that, it was kind of more selling bits and bobs from my own personal wardrobe that I wasn't wearing anymore. But yeah, so it will be almost probably a year next month that I've kind of been active on Depop.
And what prompted you to start selling? Did you see yourself as like an entrepreneur to begin with?
Oh, absolutely not. No, 100%. So I've just moved into this small flat in London and I had a lot of clothes kind of before I started Depop. I wasn't nearly as aware, of the implications of fast fashion and of constantly buying and getting rid of things in accordance with trends. And I had, a wardrobe just stacked full of stuff, most of which I'd never even worn. And so it was basically a logistics issue. I couldn't fit the stuff that I had into my flat. And so I thought, you know what, I'll sell a couple bits off, give myself a bit more room and just make a little bit of money on the side as well.
So where do you shop? Where are these amazing charity shops where you find things like you've got this gorgeous Karen Millen dress?
I have it here actually to show you.
Oh, I adore it. It's the most gorgeous thing I've ever seen in my life.
So I used to be kind of I'm located in Surrey, basically. I can't give too much away. Wait, nudge, nudge. I have to save something for myself. I'm located in Surrey, and obviously Surrey is quite an affluent area. And so I'm very lucky in the sense that the charity shops and thrifting stores tend to have kind of a good supply of stock and a huge variety of items and brands and, of different ages. You also have, where I used to live, there was a fairly large elderly community. And so actually you could find some really cool pieces from the 60s and 70s, that these grandparents and older people have gone through their wardrobes and just found and, given away.
That's
yeah, it's kind of all over. I spend a lot of time looking. It's really not as simple as there's like one place. It's like Narnia. I walk through the door and there's everything magical in there. Sometimes I'll spend like 4 or 5 hours a day, driving around looking at different, towns, different shops, different areas to try and find the right stuff. Because yeah, there's so much to look through. There is so much out there. There are so many clothes that it just takes time to find the right ones.
Sounds amazingly fun though.
No, it is. I love clothes and I love fashion and I love the act of shopping. And so it feels better to me that I'm not buying for myself and, and that I'm actually able to do that in an environment that's more sustainable. That's important to me. But, it's fun. I'll grab a coffee and a thermos, stick a tracksuit on, and then spend the day kind of trawling through different areas.
What an image. Do you keep some of the things you buy, like for yourself?
Yes. So there are some things that I've kept. So I kept an amazing pair of like Levi 501s that I found. It's so rare to find ones that fit nicely, isn't it? And, I think my rule with selling tends to be if I wouldn't buy it, then I won't try and sell it. And so that line does sometimes become blurred because obviously the stuff that I'm buying to sell is stuff that I think is amazing and is fashionable and is chic and is, and is really, classic and elegant. And so sometimes it's hard to sell. I sold a dress. I think it was in August. It was like the vintage new look. It was like blue. You might have seen it on my Instagram story. It was blue and kind of green and black. And that is probably the biggest thing I ever regret having sold, actually, because I know I'll never find anything like it ever again. So sometimes it becomes difficult to decide what to keep and what to sell.
What makes a good find? Is it the make? Is it the trend? Like, if it's clearly vintage, what makes a piece really stand out to you?
So I think in my personal sense of style, obviously everyone's is different. I kind of like classics, and I think that it's obviously nice to have statement pieces and funkier pieces in my wardrobe, but I like things that I can kind of mix together. You know, I'll have 10, 20 pieces of clothing that I mix between each other, and that's kind of how it works for me. So when I look for pieces, you know, I look for things that will go with a lot of stuff, you know, neutrals, classic shapes, classic colors, classic cuts, you know, for things like coats or blazers. It's quite easy to find, to know what I'm looking for. But the brand matters to some extent. You know, if I find, for example, a vintage Karen Millen dress, obviously it'll be worth more than a vintage Forever 21 dress. You know, there are obviously a levels to it, but I wouldn't say it's the be all and end all. At the end of the day, if someone loves something enough from how it looks alone, the brand won't make that much of a difference. But yeah, when I look for pieces, I don't just focus on brands, but if it's a nice brand or a designer brand, obviously that helps. I think you just have to trust your own sense of style. And like I said, if anyone does want to try and sell, I would recommend selling what you would buy. You know, don't try and tap into a niche or a genre or a style that you don't understand or that you're not a part of, or that you know, haven't experimented with yourself.
That's really
good. There are so many different styles out there, and you can't tap into all of them. You know, so I would say pick a style that you trust and you have faith in for the long term, that's going to be around for a while, that you personally like, that you understand, and buy things that kind of fit in accordance with that.
That's really good advice. I love that, because obviously what you do is very much classics, and that's the kind of stuff that I really like to wear and to buy. And so your shop particularly stands out to me on Depop. I mean, I look on Depop quite a lot, and I always find just
lethal, isn't it, browsing?
Yeah, there's so much stuff on there, and it's really hard to know when something is going to really stand out in your wardrobe and be something that you want to wear time and time again. So I think being able to spot that, having an eye for that, is really unique. Do you think you would love a career in fashion? What do you see yourself doing in 5 years or when you graduate?
Oh, that's a difficult question. I would love a career in fashion. You know this, obviously, I'm sure. It's just an absolutely impossible industry to break into. It's really, really difficult. And you know, before doing Depop, I never would have thought of going in that direction. But you know, the fact that I've been kind of moderately successful with it, and the fact that it seems to be going in a good direction for me kind of has opened that door a little bit more. And so I've been thinking about that. And, you know, one of the things I would love to do one day is kind of have my own designs, obviously, you know, ethically made in the UK, sustainably sourced, which means it's going to be a bit further down the line. Those, as I'm sure you know, those designs are more expensive and more difficult to manufacture. But one day I would like to do that a lot.
I can imagine.
It's nice to sell stuff that other people have made, you know, but it would be even nicer, I think, to be able to, have my own stuff. And that would be one day much further down the line. But I think for now, I'm just going to keep putting that effort into my shop, so that when I do reach that point, I kind of have the base of followers and customers and, you know, popularity to be able to kind of get it off the ground, because those things obviously require some support when you start them, because, you know, it's difficult to do. Have
you ever had any dodgy buyers on Depop? Anyone that you've kind of been like, okay?
Typically, when I sell to someone, I'll look at their reviews. It's not like I won't sell to them if they don't have any reviews. Obviously, new accounts don't have reviews, but typically you'll be able to tell if someone's dodgy. So if someone asks you to pay outside of the app, that's an immediate no. If someone says, you know, text me on this number and we'll organize a deal, again, outside of the app, just immediately no. The only thing that a buyer needs to do is essentially just pay in the app, and that's basically it. From my perspective, I always send all my items with tracked shipping, so I don't need to worry about someone scamming me. So it costs a little bit more on my end, obviously, but that's a decision that I made quite early on because I've heard so many horror stories of people sending nice items and expensive items and then someone saying they never arrived, and I just didn't want to take that risk.
No, I can imagine that's quite
yeah,
stressful.
so I always do that, but I did one time ship something internationally, and I didn't look at the prices beforehand, and it was going to be really expensive, so I sent it untracked, and it took about 3 weeks to get there, and I was terrified the whole time.
Oh my god,
it wasn't going to arrive, and I was going to have my first unhappy customer, and luckily it arrived, and she was absolutely chuffed with it. But no, after that, I made the decision executively to just pay more and send it tracked. People appreciate it on their end because they can obviously keep track of it. I appreciate it on my end because I don't have to worry about things going missing. Royal Mail will cover me if they lose the item. It's just a much better way of doing it.
What is your relationship with fast fashion?
So my relationship with fast fashion is I buy, I would say, between 80 and 90% of the things that I buy are through Depop. And then potentially about 10 or 20% of things that I buy would be from high street brands. It depends obviously on the brand, but you could call it fast fashion. And that's for several different reasons. Obviously, we need to acknowledge as a society when we talk about sustainability in fashion, that sustainable fashion isn't necessarily viable for everyone. And there are different reasons for that as well. Obviously, when you have a fast fashion brand, let's say Primark, you can get 3 shirts for £5. There aren't people who are always in the position financially or even logistically to be finding and sourcing sustainable brands that produce their clothes ethically. And it's not realistic to expect everyone to be able to immediately switch to a purely sustainable model because it is more expensive. If you look at the prices of a brand like Reformation, House of Sunny, I love these brands and I wish that I could only buy from them. But when they're charging, £220 for a dress, £150 for a pair of jeans, it was really difficult, and it's unrealistic to expect everyone to be able to do that. And I think we need to be wary sometimes in sustainability of shaming people for using fast fashion sometimes. Obviously, it's not great. Obviously, it's not good for the environment, but sometimes people don't have a choice. If I were to buy something from a fashion brand, it's normally things like earrings that I don't buy on Depop typically, either for hygiene reasons or because Depop is quite saturated with jewelry in particular, like from AliExpress, sent from China, and it's so difficult to tell between genuine pieces and non-genuine pieces. But when it comes to my clothing, I think, the majority of my clothing I buy through Depop. I buy shoes. I have bought jewelry as well, actually, but slightly nicer pieces. I've bought handbags. I've bought jackets. I would say that probably maybe once or twice a month. I shop somewhere that might be considered fast fashion, if it's a jacket in Zara that I really love and I can't find anywhere else. No one's perfect. And I think the thing that we can all do is make a commitment to ourselves that even if we can't completely cut fast fashion out of our wardrobe, to use it less, to save up a bit longer and invest in a piece from a brand that is sustainable, rather than buying 10 things from H&M a month, you only buy 5 or 2. It's about making that commitment to reduce the amount that you buy there and the amount that you consume, because at the end of the day, there's only so much the consumer can do. And I do think companies need to start taking more responsibility for their production methods. Because it seems unfair to ask, particularly people like students and young people, to stop buying fast fashion, when in reality it's just not viable for everyone.
No. And fast fashion's so tempting because
spend over £50 and you get free shipping, or 70% off if you spend over this. They have so many methods of drawing people in and getting them to spend more and buy more and consume more, that if you are going to shop fast fashion, which some people need to and some people choose to, we just need to be conscious of it. I really think it's unrealistic in the current economic climate, in with everything that's going on, especially people our age. It's unrealistic to ask people to completely cut it out. So I would say the biggest thing is to just reduce your intake, and then also look at Depop. If there's an item that you like from a brand, check Depop first. I wanted these tracksuit bottoms from Brandy Melville, and they were £25 on the website, and then I went onto Depop and found them for 20 because this girl had bought a pair, never worn them, and wanted to sell them on. If you like a top from Urban Outfitters or Zara, you don't have to buy directly from the manufacturer. Just check Depop first. Quite often it's cheaper. And obviously what you're doing then is you're contributing to a circular model of fashion, where rather than, contributing to a line of production, you're just recycling clothes that are already in circulation.
Do you feel that Depop is a way, do you think it has actually managed to financially support you? Do you think that it's a viable option for students to support themselves?
Yeah, no, I definitely think so. It's definitely made a difference for me financially. And I think that the most difficult hurdle is obviously the fact that when you thrift things to resell or buy things to resell, you need that initial bit of money to buy things. It's not as simple as you start at zero, you buy stuff and start making money. You need £50, £100 to go and get some stock to then sell. And so I would say that it's definitely viable. The only thing that I would say to consider, obviously, is that it can take a bit of time for a shop to get off the ground. You need people to trust you. You need good reviews. You need well-written listings. You need nice items. And so it's not quite as simple as buy anything in a charity shop and then sell it for 4 or 5 times more. That there is a bit more finesse that goes into it. But I definitely think if you're a uni student who knows a particular style, have faith in your sense in fashion, and you think that you can find items at a price where you would be able to make a profit on them, it takes a bit of time, it takes a bit of effort. I definitely think it's viable. The only thing I would definitely remind people to consider is that Depop take 10% of every transaction that you make.
Wow,
so
okay.
If I buy something for £10, hypothetically, I sell it for 20, Depop leave me with 18. It then costs me £4.10 to ship the item, second class line 4. So then I have £13.90. I pay for my own mailing bags. Let's just say 40p. Yeah. And I have £13.50. I also had to drive and park up in the town centre and pay for parking to buy the item, And so a lot of people, I think, and you might touch on this later, think that Depop sellers make much larger profits than they do. It's not as simple as, like I said, buying something for 10, selling it for 20, and bam, I get double the money. There's a lot more that goes into it, and that £13.50 that's left, by the way, doesn't take into account the fact that obviously I spent the time photographing it, uploading it, finding it, storing it, sending it. It can be a lot of effort when your shop starts to pick up. If you're buying a nice coat, charity shops or thrift stores quite often know the value of things. And so if you find a designer piece, they probably also know it's a designer piece. And so people need to just remember that it's not like, I'm sitting here sat on piles of cash, like laughing all the way to the bank. I put a lot of effort in, and sometimes, there are some items where I've actually made a loss on it because I haven't managed to sell it for what I wanted to initially. And I end up spending more money on it in total with the shipping and the initial cost and the packaging than I actually made from it.
There's a lot of criticism, at which you just touched on, of Depop sellers for being young, middle class, white women, girls, often, who then find things and sell products for overinflated prices and are not actually making those products accessible. My question, I suppose, is what's your take on that, and what's your opinion?
No, so I would undoubtedly agree with you that, at least until I would say a few months ago, whether this is a good thing or not, I'll go into that in a minute. Depop has mostly been saturated with typically slender, middle-class white girls, exactly like myself. Yeah. In the last few months, I don't know to what extent it's been pushed by the Black Lives Matter movement, and obviously the recent conversations you've had about racial issues in our society and inequalities and social injustices. But Depop have been making a noticeably bigger effort to project Black sellers, in their top sellers list and their suggested sellers list, meet the sellers. I don't know if you know Depop, you get those emails, obviously, suggesting users Black fashion, Black history. They've made much more of an effort to be inclusive. What you're saying about accessibility of fashion, I agree with as well. There are sellers on Depop. I'm not going to name names, but obviously I, be it using it a lot, see the same accounts doing the same things. There's a difference between finding a Ralph Lauren jumper that is rare and vintage and in good condition and selling it for 40 or 50 quid, and then finding a rare Brandy Melville tee which isn't rare and then selling it for like £200. We have this thing we call Brandy Melville girls in the Depop community. I do take issue with that, because what it does is it obviously scams the buyers who think they're buying items that are rare or vintage when they're not. Obviously, it takes people's trust and faith out of other Depop sellers, because they worry that we're all overcharging for items and that we're all finding them super, super cheap somehow and then, selling them on for loads more. When that happens, I personally like to think that I price my items quite fairly. There are things on my page that are, £15, and there are things on my page that are £100, but the things on my page that are £100 are, vintage Burberry trench coats. I think that's, there's a certain Exactly, that's fair enough. And so I like to think that I price my items fairly. What I typically do when I price an item is I look to see what other people are selling them for on Depop. You'll see some on the higher end and some on the lower end. And from those numbers, I decide what I think it's worth. No, I do agree that it's an issue on Depop, and it's a shame because it gives resellers a bad reputation. When in reality, a lot of resellers are, maybe middle class, or, may not be as financially well off as other people, and they use Depop as their source of income. Not everyone who sells on Depop is necessarily in that financial position. And so the fact that people get this skepticism when buying items is difficult, and it makes it a lot harder for people. But I do think the Depop have made a real effort to somewhat diversify their top sellers. Yeah. And I think that's a good thing. Look, to some extent, it irritates me a bit that it's only off the back of the last kind of few months of deep political and social unrest. That makes me slightly uncomfortable. But the fact that it's happening at all obviously is a good thing. Yeah. And the fact that they're making an effort to be more inclusive and to, project these sellers and give them the same attention that white middle class, girls have been getting for a long time, I think is a good thing. For me, intention matters with these things, the intention behind it. And I think we have seen as a society a lot of jumping on the bandwagon of political movements recently by corporations. And I think we just need to be aware of that.
Do you think that this criticism, the other stuff of inaccessibility, do you think it's just another way to devalue women's entrepreneurship?
To some extent, I would agree with that. Depop, from what I've seen, is primarily female-based. There are many more female sellers than male sellers. From what I've experienced when browsing, obviously I buy women's things, but nonetheless, in their top sellers list, their suggested sellers list, I'd say it's 7 or 8 out of 10 people on there are women. We need to dispel the notion, like you said earlier, that all Depop sellers are middle class, people coming from wealthy families who are making, clothes inaccessible. A lot of people on Depop, a lot of people that I know and have communicated with are students or young people or young parents, young adults who are literally trying to pay their bills, who are trying to build up a sustainable source of income they can rely on. And so I think to some extent people can be a bit harsh. I think the idea of what you get when you think of a reseller is like a TikTok girl, going like thrifting, Brandy Melville tops on, you know what, Doc Martens, exactly what I'm talking about, I think, in your mind. And that's not what it is. The success of Depop is relatively based in female sellers. Might be, there might be some prejudice there. It feels like when women start to succeed and make money, in whatever arena, we've seen it in the music industry where women are, over-sexualized, even, and you see it all the time. You see it in sport, the second women start to be successful in their own right, without male help, without male-dominated industries. This is fashion, obviously, which is a female-dominated industry in terms of consumers. People start to have issue with it. Yeah, I do think that when I tell people sometimes, particularly older men, or middle-aged men, what it is that I do to make money, they seem really skeptical and quite often very condescending, like, oh, so you just buy things and then just sell them again, like. And yeah, I understand maybe it's a generational gap. I think it's fair to say that I really do, and I could say that this with conviction, I put so much work and love into my page and to my customers and to the stuff that I find and source. It really, for me, is something that I try to do my best at every single day. And I put a lot of effort in. I have to source them, I have to store them, I have to photograph them, I have to write the listings, I have to ship the items, I have to deal with problems. It's sometimes it's an all day, everyday thing sometimes. And so to be kind of, looked down on for, being entrepreneurial, when if you were to talk about a middle-aged man starting his own law firm, or, no one would treat it the same way. Yeah. And I think it's interesting, actually, the gender base of that. I hadn't really thought of that before. That's a really interesting question.
Our magazine theme is defiance. So I was wondering in what way you view your shop as a form of defiance, whether that's defiance against fast fashion, against the difficulties that COVID has brought, or in any other view.
I obviously take great issue with fast fashion. Like I spoke about earlier, look, if I'm not perfect, I might buy from a brand that would be considered fast fashion once, twice a month. But for me, the more time I've spent on Depop, the more I've realized that, contributing to to companies that they contribute hugely to the exploitation of workers and children. And, you know, they make it so much harder for small businesses to succeed because you just can't compete with them, can you? You can't compete on prices or manufacturing or cost or, you know, the speed at which you can ship and produce it. You can't do anything. And so I think Depop, and then in a sense, I guess as an extension of that, my page would be something of a defiance against that.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, I like to think maybe that during COVID, I like to think that people see my page and like it. And, you know, it's a way of, I guess, buying clothes during the pandemic is just a way of, in my mind, defying the fact that we're all kind of stuck inside. We'll be out one day, we can wear nice things, you know, we'll be able to go to dinner again and wear that dress or those boots. And, you know, for me, fashion is beauty. I really love fashion. And so when someone buys like an item from my page, I really get so excited to send it to them and for them to have it and keep it and love it. And I guess COVID has taken a lot of that enthusiasm that we have for life and kind of beauty and, you know, aestheticism. There's a lot of conversations at the moment about the arts industry suffering. I think, yeah, it's just a way of getting like a little bit of beauty, a little bit of art into your life. I really like it.
Is there anything else that you'd like to talk about before I end the interview?
The only thing I would say about Depop is it's a great app, and obviously you can find a lot of really amazing stuff on there. There are kind of two things that I would want to remind people of. First of all, Depop isn't necessarily always cheaper. And this isn't always because people are just buying stuff super cheap and then inflating the prices. But, you know, sometimes, particularly when things might be handmade or customized or, you know, or it's a particular item or it's a particular store, things might not always be as cheap as you want them to be. So a lot of people think of Depop as people like throwing their old crusty shirts on the page for like £5 and selling them. You know, a lot of people find really nice items and have really, you know, really good stores. And so the thing to remember is you're not necessarily paying less money, but you are paying for sustainability and you are paying for a more ethical mode of fashion, as you would with a brand that is more sustainable. I think that's fair to say. And the only other thing about Depop is you should be always wary of sellers. And I think that as a buyer, if anyone on here is a buyer, is planning to be a buyer, make sure you do a deep dive of their reviews. When I buy something from someone, I go back like months and make sure that most people have had a positive experience. Second of all, if they're using stock photos, it's probably not real. It's probably from China. And second of all, again, if the price seems too good to be true, more often than not, it is.
It is.
Yeah, I think if I were to encourage people to use the app, but give them a warning, that would probably be the three things that I'd want to focus on.
And lastly, are there any pieces that you particularly love that you can show me now?
Oh my goodness, yeah. You mean ones that I myself bought or that I'm selling?
Either.
Okay, so one of my favorite pieces that I've bought was a birthday present from my boyfriend. Well, I didn't buy it, he bought it, but it's mine now. It's this little bag. It's a little Fendi Mama Zuka baguette bag. I won't tell you how much it was, but it wasn't nearly as much as you would think that it was. And yeah, I love it. I really love it. It's one of my favorite pieces. The fact, obviously, that I bought it from a reseller, I'm really happy about. Quite often, because the item's vintage and might have a little bit of damage to it, people really lower the price. And so if you're looking for a present for yourself, for your friend, or you just want to indulge, you can find some really cool bits on there. This is my most recent purchase. They're these like faux croc print, like faux leather boots. They were like 23 quid or something on Depop.
Wow, not bad.
So not that bad. I think they're from New Look and I bought them from a page. Probably one of my other favorite ones that I bought for myself. It's like this gorgeous like royal blue faux suede like shearling like biker jacket with these like metallic sections. It's like patchwork look, and I just find it so cool.
That is amazing.
I think I picked 4 that are my current favorites, and these 4 are all actually available on my page at the moment. So this is a genuine leather jacket by Levi's from the 1970s.
Oh my god.
It's got these little buckles at the back so that you can like tie the waist so that it's all like cinched in. It's got this leather interior, this red interior, and it's gorgeous. It's from the 1970s, and
that's insane.
The leather, and it's gorgeous. Yeah, it fits amazingly. Your favorite, I think.
I love it.
A little black 90s Karen Millen dress gown. Yeah, the beads and the paillettes are just so well put on. I think they're all probably like maybe hand sewn. They're really delicate but gorgeous. And you've got this little 90s like keyhole detailing.
Wow, you must be so excited when you found that.
I would keep it, but I just know it's one of those things that I would never, ever, 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 ever wear. I'd rather someone who actually goes out places and has drinks with people. This is actually, I think I mentioned earlier, the Burberry trench coat that I've got up. It's got these little lapels that come out in like the Nova check. And so, yeah, you can wear it like that. And it's so classic. You've got this big chunky collar as well, and you can cinch it.
Great. Such a classic piece.
It is so I mean, again, I would keep it, but I can't keep this. Last one I just put up this morning, actually. It's a vintage like Ralph Lauren flag jumper.
Oh, that's so cute.
Like the RL 67, and you've got this chunky like turtleneck that you can zip and button up.
Someone is going to adore that thing.
Gorgeous blue.
That is going to be someone's jumper that they wear over and over again.
Yeah, you know what I mean? And I love that. And exactly, and these pieces that I've shown you are all pieces that I would charge slightly more for. But again, they weren't necessarily cheap for me to find.
No, I can imagine.
And I really think they're worth it. These, you know, they're all such unique pieces. I've never seen them before. And again, I'd say they're all classics. That's how I pick my stuff. Nothing too fancy, nothing too out there.
So thank you so much for agreeing to do this interview with me.
Well, thank you for having me.
Now, yeah, thank you so much, and hopefully you'll enjoy the article.